going to be looking at the external analysis of the firm. Now we're starting to have fun with the lecture and the topics that we're looking at here. So the external analysis of the firm, this is a critical element of analysis for that firm. They need to analyze what's going on, obviously externally, of that firm. This is going to be that macro environment, and that macro environment is inclusive of 6 different categories of assessment that we need to take a look at. And we'll go through all 6 of those here in just a second. But let's take a look at some of the things that we're going to be covering in this chapter here. All right, we're going to look at the most important strategic aspects of that organization's environment as indicated by those 6 different categories. A good way to remember these different categories is the acronym PESTLE, P-E-S-T-L-E. We'll go through that. Then we're going to look at environmental scanning, environmental monitoring, and competitive intelligence. Those 3 things are critical for the input for strategic forecasting. We'll also take a look at ANSOF's 4 characteristics that define what environmental turbulence is. We're going to be looking at today the SWOT analysis and SWOT matching and confrontation matrix. Now, when we return on Thursday, we'll pick it up at the impact probability, and then we have some others to take a look at, like the competitive forces that are found in the external environment and how to construct a strategic group map identifying in an industry of all of those who are in that industry, which of those are our greatest competition. And then what we're going to be looking at finally here is how to construct an external factors evaluation analysis on the data that you have pulled from your SWOT. All right, so definition here, starting off with environmental scanning. It is the internal communication of that external information about issues that can have an influence on that organization's decision-making process. So you have analysts within that firm, they are scanning that macro environment and they're looking for these issues that can have an effect on the firm's performance. Whether that effect is going to be positive or negative, they're looking for both. So let me give you an idea of what it is that they're scanning for. This is the PESTLE framework. So a PESTLE framework is that tool, or it's really just an acronym to remind those analysts to look at each one of these different categories and how each one of these different categories can have an effect on that firm. So we'll start off with the PESTLE with the first one, political. And we know that political changes, laws and regulations and restrictions can have an effect on industries and firms in those industries. The first one that we'd look at would be government stability and whether or not there's going to be changes that might occur within that stability of that government. Now, not so much domestically. We have a really stable government here in the US, but let's say that you're thinking about entering into a foreign country. That's a growth strategy. You would certainly want to make sure that the stability of that government has been accounted for and assessed before you enter into that country and do business. What about the level of bureaucracy that exists? Is it local? Is it county-wide? Is it statewide? Is it domestic? What level of bureaucracy are you going to be facing? And certainly, again, you're going to be looking at the level of that when we're going internationally. Looking at the rates and incentives of tax policies and the corruption level, not so much domestically, but again, internationally, freedom of press. Is there regulation, deregulation that is imposed on industries? Trade controls, import restrictions on either quantity or quality. Tariffs. Well, we know tariffs have an effect on industries. The last administration did place tariffs on not only China, but also on Canada and Mexico. And Canada and Mexico are favored trade partners. So, even though you might think that you're dealing in business with a country that is not going to be affected by tariffs, things can happen. Competitive regulations. What kind of involvement does the government have in trade unions and agreements? What kind of influence are they imposing on industry with environmental laws, education laws, consumer protection and e-commerce, and then laws that regulate environmental pollution? That certainly is a big concern, especially if you're manufacturing. You want to make sure, or they want to make sure, that you're not causing any kind of pollutants to escape. That's political. And you notice that there's quite a few of those different areas under political that we have to look at. Let's then go to economic. Now, when we're considering economic, we're considering regional, national, and global economic conditions. And we're not only looking at the areas in which we are competing, but we're looking at areas that we might want to enter into. Looking at it economically here. All right. First one, growth rate. That certainly is a concern. If we're going to be entering into a new area, or we're in an area and competing, we want to know whether or not that particular economic forces on that area will encourage growth. Inflation rates. What is the inflation rate of the area in which you're doing business, or where you may want to do business? Well, we've noticed recently that the inflation has been pretty high. And that is a concern of a lot of the governmental agencies are trying to find ways to get that inflation rate under control. A lot of it has to do with the supply chain disruption. So one of the areas that they have as a control measure is interest rates. And you've noticed then, if you've been looking out there, interest rates have gone up. Now, we know that both of those two things, inflation and interest, have an effect on performance of firms in industries. Exchange rates, this would be internationally again. Is it stable? Is it highly fluctuating? What about unemployment trends that are existing? Well, we see here in the United States that there is industries that are suffering because they can't find people to work for them. There are industries that are posting bonuses for individuals to come work for them. They'll give them as much as a $20,000 bonus to sign and work for us. And because of that lack of numbers, headcount of employees, the firm is not able to achieve, full benefits of what their output could be. Labor costs. Well, we know that labor costs are going up just simply because there's a lack of employment out there for companies. What stage of the business cycle are we in? Are we in the introductory stage? Are we in that early growth stage? Are we in the growth stage that is starting to see some saturation? Are we in the mature stage, or are we in the decline stage? That's important to know where we are. What kind of availability is there to credit, trade flows and patterns? And what about disposable income for the consumers? Monetary policies, fiscal policies, fluctuation in pricing, stock market trend. The stock market's been all over the place the last week. Started out the new year doing fine, increased, and then it went south real quick. Yesterday was a roller coaster. It was down as much as 1,000 points yesterday, and it did finish up about 100 points, but that's just ridiculous. Weather and then climate change as well. All right, those are some of those factors that we would look at under economic. Let's take a look at social. This would be lifestyle changes in society. How does that consumer feel about health consciousness, about education, What is their attitude towards imported goods and services? Their attitude towards leisure and career and retirement and product quality and customer service? What is their attitude towards saving and investing and safety? What kind of lifestyle does that societal group have? What are their buying habits, their beliefs and religion? Attitudes toward green or ecological products, attitude towards support for renewable energy. What about growth rate, population growth rate, and immigration rates? Well, we know there's been a lot of discussion about immigration. Will that have some sort of an effect on the industry that you're in? Age distribution, life expectancy. Sex distribution, average disposable income level, social classes. There is starting to become more and more a stratification of our social classes in the United States. We have the super elite rich, then we have somewhat of a upper middle class, but then there's an increasingly large lower class in the United States. Is that going to have an effect on businesses, family size and structure, and minorities? Moving on, technology. Now we know technology is a tremendous benefit for many, many industries and companies. Advancements in cellular technology, advancements in speed and storage and reliability of computer systems, all of that is fantastic. It's aided manufacturing, it's aided transportation, it's aided logistics, it's everything. It has really helped all of those with the advancement of technology. But it must be remembered that technology is also an industry killer. It is one of the greatest killers of industry than of any of the six that we identify here. So it's important then for the analysts that are scanning, looking at technology. Where is technology going? Which direction? Is it heading in a direction that will make us and what we do here obsolete? And if so, we need to really highlight that with our decision makers, that at some point it will make us obsolete. So what are we going to do? Are we going to change what we're doing? Are we going to try and modify it? Are we going to become, are we going to sell the company? What are we going to do? Other areas that we'd look at with technology would be infrastructure, rate of technological change. How much spending is on R&D? What about incentives provided to technology companies by the government? Are there changes in legislation regarding technology? What level of technology exists within our industry? And again, this kind of goes back to that original statement. Where is it heading? Communication infrastructure. Is there access, readily access to the newest technology? Internet infrastructure and penetration, and disruption of technology. Well, that's kind of an odd thing, disruption of technology. But let me give you a real life example of disruption of technology. Ford, and manufacturing their brand new pickup, their Maverick pickup, announced that they're going to stop their production at a certain number. And the reason that they're going to halt production of that brand new vehicle, even though the demand is there, they have more demand than what that vehicle, what they can produce. And the reason they can't produce anymore is they can't get the chips, the computer chips to manufacture that goes into those trucks. So they have to limit the production. So right there's a good example of disruption to that industry caused by technology and the development of technology. It's having a limiting effect on what Ford can do, and of course, their profitability as well. Let's go to the next one, environmental. Now we're looking at factors that we as humans may have been a cause of these environmental factors. Now, I know that there's been a lot of discussion and disagreement on both sides, and both sides have been presenting their cases of, yes, there is climate change, and no, there's not climate change. It's irrelevant. It does not make any difference. I don't care what your position is on climate change. We know that influences of the climate have had an effect on industry. Whether or not you believe it or not, doesn't make any difference. The fact remains still that it does have an effect on industry. So we have to take an awareness of that. We have to be prepared for those types of situations. In addition to that, what about infrastructure? The support of infrastructure for the environment. Oil and gas development. How is that being monitored? Are we watching about the oil and gas and how that is being developed? Are we polluting areas because of our development of oil and gas? Certainly deforestation is important. That's a driver of global warming. Brazil burning up the Amazon so that they have more room for cattle to graze. Well, that causes not only the pollutants going in the air, which is tremendous amount of pollutants, but it's changing the climate down in Brazil as well. Overfishing, wildfires. Well, I don't even have to tell you about wildfires. If you live on the West Coast, going from Washington all the way down to California, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, you know about wildfires and you know about the effects of wildfires. That's not even a discussion point. We know that exists. Flooding, East Coast, they have experienced tremendous amounts of flooding that are different than what's happened in many, many previous years. Pollution, that's always been with us and that's always a concern. And we're trying to control the amount of pollutants that are being emitted. But it can't just come from the United States, even though we are a polluter. It's got to come from some of the other countries out there as well. What about water scarcity? Well, California has been in a drought for many, many years. And I'm sure if you guys live in California, you'll notice that Lake Mead or Lake Powell or Oroville Dam or some of the other dams that are in California, their water level is at a critical level, lower than they've been in years and years and years. Now that has an effect then on the Central Valley of California because they use that water to irrigate their fields for produce, huge produce area in Central California. And if they can't get enough water, that means they're going to have to cut back on the areas that they are going to water, which means they're going to cut back on the amount of production that they're going to have for fruits and vegetables. There's going to be fewer of that available to go to the stores. And if there's fewer of it going to the stores, that means the price of it's going up. And then soil erosion, that comes along with water scarcity or the mismanagement of how to apply water. One more, legal. These are the factors, the laws and how we operate businesses and how the customers behave. Things like antitrust, discrimination laws, copyright, patents, intellectual property, consumer protection and e-commerce, employment laws, health and safety, data protection. Data protection has been a big thing. There have been these breaches on data security by who knows who they are. That's a huge area of concern for companies now. Now, you notice that we had these 6 different categories, and within each of these 6 categories, there were many factors that you need to take a look at. So as analysts for a firm, your job is to go through these and see if you see shifts on these. Now, and if you identify them, and if you're in an industry and your company is going to be influenced by some of these factors, or maybe several of these factors, there is an additive effect to them. Excuse me, not an additive, it's a multiplier effect. Let me back that up there, I misspoke. So it's not like you've got employment law, and then on top of that, there's another type of thing. And then on top of that, there's another thing. No, it's a magnifying effect. It's called imbrication of causal strands is what it's called. It's an overlapping of these factors. It's a multiplying effect of these factors. So if you're in an industry and that industry and your firm are going to be affected by many of these things, that is going to be a cause of concern for those decision makers. We've got a bunch of stuff that we have to deal with here, in addition to just normal competition. Now, one more area that we have to take a look at. Actually, 2 more, but let me start with the next one here. And that's our competition. Sun Tzu says this. He says, if you know the enemy better than you know yourself, the outcome of that battle has already been decided. Simply, what Sun Tzu is saying is this: the more you know about your competition, the more you know about what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what their resources are available, what their capabilities are, where they see threats, where they might see opportunities. The more you know about them, the better your strategy is going to be. You can formulate a better strategy having that information. So Brady, let me ask you a question. I'm going to throw this out there for you. Brady's a fun guy to deal with. I've talked to him many times. Brady, you ready? Or are you gone? He's gone. I caught him, didn't I? How about, let's do this then. I know who else was there. Let's see. How about a good one here? Joyce, you're always fun. Are you ready, Joyce? All right.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you a question, Joyce. Joyce, you and I are competitors, right? Now, if I know your strategy, will the decisions that I make, would they be different than if I didn't know your strategy?
Yes.
Of course they would. Now, if I know your strategy and you know my strategy, and I know that you know my strategy, would my decisions be different?
Yes.
One more. If I know your strategy, you know my strategy, and you know that I know your strategy, would your strategy be different?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. The more you know about what's going on, your strategy starts to shift. It really does change. Think of sports, guys. Think of football. If the opposing team knows what the offense is going to do, and the offense knows that the opposing team knows they know, they're going to do something different, aren't they? That's the good thing about game theory, is what you know and what they know, and then do they know that you know that they know that you know, and you can go down a whole string on that one there. All right. Here's the next thing we need to look at then. It is competitive intelligence. So this is our competition. How do we get information about them? You really can't go out there and ask them. You can't go up to Mitch's company and say, hey, Mitch, my name's Joseph. I have a company. We compete against each other. And what I'd really like to have you tell me, because I really want to formulate a strategy that's going to be effective against you. Can you tell me what you're strong at? And can you tell me where you're really weak, maybe in resources and and maybe in capabilities. And can you tell me whether or not you're funded well? And what opportunities do you see out there, Mitch? Well, I guarantee you that Mitch and his company is not going to tell Joseph that. They're not. So how do you find out this information? And it really takes digging. If they're a public company, maybe you can get information from their annual report. Oftentimes that annual report will kind of give you hints about the direction that that firm is going. Market statistics, newspaper, journals, customers, former employees, any bit of information that you can pull in is better than nothing. Okay, that's two now, scanning and intelligence. Now, once we've scanned, and you notice that we had a series of 6 different categories with multiple areas under there. Now what we have to do is monitor them. Are they continuing to develop? Is this becoming more frequent? Is it becoming more severe? That's the monitoring. That's that part of it. So environmental monitoring is that recording of the frequency, the sequence, the predictability, the evolution of those trends. It's looking at the changeability of those trends. So we got scanning, we got monitoring, we've got competitive intelligence. Those 3 things come together to help us create our forecast. They're essential. We need that information. As it relates to our overall strategy, it looks like this here. So the formulation part is here. We've done our mission statement, our vision statement, goals and objectives. Externally, we're doing that analysis. Internally, we're going to be talking about that in chapter 4. We do an internal analysis, and that's looking at our functional areas, our resources and capabilities. But right now, we're going to have a little bit of information that we can put together for our SWOT analysis, and that's what we're going to be talking about next. Now, from that SWOT, it's going to give us a lot of data that we can use towards our strategic plan. In addition to that SWOT analysis, there's several other matrices that go in there as well to help us formulate the strategic plan. We then implement, and then we monitor it to make sure that that strategy is proceeding in the direction that we want it to. So let's talk about the SWOT. All right, it is a strategic tool. It is used to analyze the firm and the industry conditions. Internally, it looks at the firm's strengths and weaknesses. These are factors that you can control. You can maintain strengths. You can change weaknesses. You can also lose strengths because you're not doing the appropriate attention to that. When we're looking internally, what we're assessing would be the firm's functional areas, the resources, the capabilities, and management. So when we're talking about strengths, what do we mean by that? Let's say Mia has a company and she has good customer service. Okay, she's got good customer service. Bryce also has a company and he has good customer service. Now, can Mia's company exploit the fact that she has good customer service to those customers that are currently being sold by Bryce? Can she say, come on over to my company because we have good customer service?
Probably not, because both companies are equal in having
That's
their
right.
strength.
It's called competitive parity. It is competitive parity. There's no advantage there. Neither one has an advantage. Now, if Mia has exceptional, excellent customer service, and Bryce only has good customer service, now can she exploit that?
At that point, yes.
We are going to spoil you as customers. You come to my company and customer service is going to be the best that you've ever seen. you can exploit that. So when we're looking at whether or not that is a strength or not, we have to make sure that it truly is something that can be exploited. All right, externally. Now we're looking at opportunities which the environment presents to that firm, and based on that firm's resources, capabilities, and competencies can exploit. Now you can list an opportunity out there, but if you don't have any way to pursue it, you don't have the resources, you don't have the capabilities, well, yeah, you've identified it. It is an opportunity that exists in that environment. Now what you have to do is find a way for your company to exploit it. Threats are those things that are largely beyond the control of your firm. Technology changes, legal changes, societal changes, beyond the control of your firm. Nothing you can do about them. But here's the thing about those types of threats: when they're of that kind, that category, it's not only affecting your company, it's also affecting your competitors. So if there is a technological shift that has a negative effect on your industry, it's also having a negative effect on your competitors. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. Now, when we do a SWOT analysis, not only do we do one on ourselves, obviously, but it would be helpful to do one on your competition. List their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So let's take a look at the SWOT. All right, a little bit more. External opportunities, talked about that. External threats, talked about that. So we don't have to do that one more time. Here we go. So you can think of a SWOT analysis as asking 4 questions. What makes you strong? What makes you weak? What opportunities are in the marketplace? And this is critical, that you can capitalize on. And then what type of threats out there that can have an effect on our firm achieving its goals and mission? Those are the 4 questions. So when we look at the SWOT analysis, the framework looks like this. We've done our environmental scanning that identifies these factors. That would be put here in the external analysis. Internally, again, that's going to be chapter 4. We do internal analysis and we put them here, strengths and weaknesses. Now, I know you guys have a case study that's going to be coming up, and it's going to be asking you to do a SWOT analysis on a company that you choose. Well, after reading through your case analysis, you should be able to identify what that firm is good at and what that firm is weak at, what opportunities they have and what threats they have. So if you have any questions when you get to that, maybe you're uncertain about what to do, just let me know and I'll try and help you out on that, or I will help you out. So going further onto the SWOT, here's what we're going to do. We're going to list the key internal strengths. We're also going to list the key external weaknesses. Excuse me, internal weaknesses. Brain dead here. Then we're going to list the external opportunities and the external threats. And now we start matching. We're going to match our strengths and those opportunities that we've identified. Second area, we're going to match those weaknesses with those opportunities that we've identified. Third thing, we're going to match the strengths with the threats, and then weaknesses with the threats. And we're going to record it in a matrix, a 2x2 matrix. Looks like this. It's actually a 3x3, but the recording is done in a 2x2. All right. So we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses, we have our opportunities and our threats. They're listed here. Now you notice that even though there's areas for 5 on here, we may not be able to identify 5 weaknesses or 5 opportunities. You only put down what you can identify. So you can see under strengths, we have unique product, access to capital, high quality, technology, and it's got a good company image. So let's go to the strengths, opportunities, strategies. So in the TAN section here, you have areas of 5 listings. And again, if you can't match it, you can't match it. Only match what you're able to match. So in the first matching area right here, it's telling us that strength 1, unique product, can be used on opportunity number 3, merger and acquisition, 1-3. Strength 2, access to capital. Well, that one we can use on both 1, relocate the business, and 3, mergers and acquisitions. Strength number 3, we have high quality. That can be used with mergers and acquisitions as well. Strength 4, technology. Well, we can use that for societal changes, social changes. And company image, strength 5, can be used with mergers and acquisitions. Now, on the weaknesses opportunity side here, we've only identified one, and that one is manufacturing costs. Now, what we're looking at in this particular case, are these opportunities such that it can mitigate that weakness that we have there? And in this case, 1, relocate the business would mitigate manufacturing costs. And number 3, mergers and acquisitions would mitigate manufacturing costs. Let's do one more. Let's go down to weakness and threats. So we've already identified that manufacturing is a weakness. So where is this weakness that we've identified? What can take advantage of that? And if we look at number 4, new competition. We also have poor marketing. And because of our poor marketing, again, new competition can take advantage of us. Are you guys getting an idea how this plays out, this matching plays out? What we're doing here is we're taking that list and we're applying more or a deeper level of critical thought to those items on that list by doing the matching. We're actually thinking this through now. An important note here, when you do a SWOT analysis, it is a static look. It is a look of the here and now, right now. And we know that the industry is dynamic and it's always changing. Those strengths that we have may not be a strength later on. The opportunities that we identify may not exist later on. There may be different threats than what we've identified now, or additional threats, or maybe some of those threats, like in this case, tariffs, maybe it's gone. So it is a static look of a dynamic situation. And saying that, it just means this: if your firm has done a SWOT analysis 3 months ago, it's not going to work today. You have to do a new one. All right. From this, we notice that we've got the matching on there. And from that matching, we know that some of these factors the firm would pursue before others. That just makes sense. So what the next step is on the SWOT analysis is something called the confrontation matrix. It is used to further analyze that combination of those factors that we've identified in the SWOT. And we're looking at the most important strategic issues. So by doing that, the most important ones, we can list them and we can prioritize them. In this particular case, you notice we got our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And strength 2 and opportunity 1 has a number 3 and a red circle around it. That means that would be a high priority. Strength 3 and opportunity number 2 also had a high priority. There should be a red circle around this one, and I have to correct that one. Number 2s would be the second most priority. And then number 1s would be the lowest priority of the firm to pursue. All right. Well, that's where we're stopping today, guys. And